Okay, so we're going to go over the numbers like we do every single week. And then we've got one of those scenarios again where the Toronto real estate numbers haven't been published. And we're in a very fortunate situation because based on the data point we're going to see today, we can make some predictions in terms of what to expect with the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. So looking at the base metrics, we'll look at the average asset sell ratio and we'll look at it monthly. So it has been a downwards trend. We've been reporting this since it started happening in any event. We're still not too far from the 1 mark, but properties are selling under asking. Now, a lot of the agents that I've been on calls with from our office, they're saying that a part of this is because of the seasonal adjustment. In the winter time, you obviously will see a short in terms of the number of listings that are available and the number of sales because priorities for the average household have changed. And so it's typical. And so with less transactions happening, then there's less numbers that are going to impact the average asset sell ratio as well. So we're kind of hovering around the 0.98, 0.99. That hasn't changed too much. And this last data point from the last week, you have to keep in mind that it's based on 115 sales and 134 listings. So the data pool is very small in terms of this number. So my point is that when you look at this week's adjustments, they're based on a very small number of transactions versus when we were looking at, for example, October, we were looking at 1860 transactions with 613 sales. That's a way wider net and pool, and that obviously fluctuates in terms of where we are, right, when you look at these numbers. So the impact is a little bit different. So do keep that in mind. That way, when you're talking to your clients, your prospects, you're doing these videos online, you have that in the back of your mind. Now, in terms of average days on market, so I say this all the time. I'm going to say it again for anybody that's new to the team, new to this kind of call. Average days on market is not the same thing as months of inventory. Months of inventory, when they talk about the type of market, whether it's a buyer's market, balanced market, seller's market, those markets are based on the amount of inventory. And if no new inventory were to hit the market, how long would it take for that inventory to get absorbed? So as an example, anywhere between 0 and 4 months of inventory is what we call a seller's market. 4 to 6 months of inventory is a balanced market. That's kind of where we want things. Anything more than 6 months of inventory is a buyer's market. So don't confuse the days on market. Now we're sitting at an average of 39 days on market. Don't look at this data and be like, oh, that's a long time and we must be in a buyer's market. They are related, but they're different metrics. So the average number of days on market currently is 39. And again, the grain of salt here is we're basing this on just 100 transactions and a handful of sales. So this is not something that you should look at from a trend perspective. This is probably an anomaly based on the data points we have versus when we look at, thousands of transactions in a week, that's more material information that we can use and leverage. So average days on market right now, again, it tends to cool off in the winter. The last couple of winters, it didn't cool off because money was free. During the COVID era, when we had interest rates at 0.25% baseline, like money was next to free. And that's why we saw some of the transactions in those months that we wouldn't have normally seen. Now, if you look back a little bit further, you can see this is last 12 months weekly. If you compare it, for example, to January in the beginning of the last year versus December now, it's not too far off. So this is pretty normal to see this sort of a trend throughout the year. In terms of the average sale price, so again, we're talking about a minuscule amount of data. We're sitting at 1.2 versus 1.3. So it's fluctuating a little bit, but this is based on a small data percentage. Now, what I want to do is I want to take this same data now and extrapolate it to 3 years monthly. And let's look at this information and see what we can kind of predict. So if you look at the average sale price, this is the end of December. We're talking about 1. Treb's numbers are going to come out this week or next, probably this week. And the story is going to be interesting because when you go back and look at the last December, we are sitting at 1.3 million. Just like last November, we were 1.3 million. And last November, we were 1.3 million. The last time we did this in the beginning of November, we predicted that the numbers would look very similar. Well, based on what we're seeing here, we're at 1.3 now. We were at 1.3 last December. So when Treb publishes their numbers, you shouldn't see a big shift. There's not going to be any big headline with media outlets saying, oh, prices have crashed or prices have gone up in an absorbent kind of way. What we're going to see is that we're kind of where we were year over year. It hasn't gone up or down too much, meaning that if you bought a property even last December and you carried it for a whole year, even if you went up just marginally with the principal payments you're making on your mortgage, you probably made some equity. It may not be a whole lot of equity, but you did make equity. And the alternative would have been to rent, where you're paying somebody else's mortgage and you're getting nothing at the end of it. So even if you bought a property last December and you held it, you may not see a material bump in terms of your purchase price going up or your average sale price going up, but you did build equity by paying down your mortgage, and we should still see a marginal increase or decrease, but nothing that's going to be earth-shattering or a news-breaking story as far as I can tell you. Now, let's take a look at the other data point here, which we've been tracking now, which is our projections in terms of months of inventory. So on the freehold market side of things, I've extrapolated all of the numbers. We're sitting at about 1.6 months of inventory. Now, you have to keep in mind that the data I'm tracking here is not like TREB's data. TREB's data, some of the numbers that they report are averages for all property types. I think it's unfair to merge in condominiums with freeholds, with townhouses and everything else. That's why I like to look at things either freehold or condominium, and I don't merge them. So some of the tabloids will merge this data, which means when you're looking at it, it may not reconcile or make sense. And I think when you're giving clients advice, the advice you have to give is based on the type of property and the geographic location that they're looking at. So freehold, GTA, not including Halton, we're sitting at about 1.6 months of inventory at the end of December, which means that we're very much in a seller's market for freehold properties. So that's going to be reassuring for a lot of the people that you're talking to. Okay, now looking at supply and demand. So on the gray side, the blue side is the total number of sales. The gray side is the total number of listings. We've seen these two narrow in on one another. And trend-wise, they've been going up and down together, which is why we've seen a stabilization in prices between 1.3, 1.4, 1.2, even on a week-over-week basis. So you look at where we are right now, number of listings versus number of sales, it's not too far out. They're quite consolidated. I think with the next announcement with the Bank of Canada, I think it's this week or next, we're not expecting a rate change. If there isn't a rate change, that will be interesting because we've been monitoring the data points on that as well. And we know that the rates have been sitting at 5% since July 2023. Not expecting the rates to come down this next rate announcement, but we can see that the fixed rates are already about 30 basis points less. Bond yields have inversed. And when we look at what we're expecting on the variable side, although we may not see a rate adjustment this announcement, inflationary pressures and the numbers we're looking at are optimistic, which means by the end of this quarter, most people are predicting that we're going to start seeing the Bank of Canada overnight rate start coming down and the variable rates will be impacted by that. So when we saw the rates stabilize in the past, we saw prices start going up. This year's been troubling, right? The last year for a lot of people has been a struggle. And with the extrapolated number of transactions we're looking at, currently, we're sitting at probably around 60 to 65,000 transactions, which is a very, very insignificant number of transactions compared to our peak years like 2021, where, you know, the agents in TREB's roster had written over 121,000 transactions. This year, we're closer to the 67, 70s range, which will be interesting in terms of reporting. So supply and demand have kind of come in on each other. We expect the number of listings to start increasing, especially as we get into the middle and end of January, and we'll keep monitoring those numbers. Now, let's quickly take a look at the condominium side of things. So condominiums, the story isn't very different. It's kind of sitting at the same average in terms of the ask to sell ratio. Hasn't gone up or down too much. It's been pretty consistent. Average days on market is higher. It's 47 versus the 39 on the other side. So it's a little bit different. But again, when we look at the condominium market, in terms of condominiums, we're at 2.7 months of inventory based on the extrapolated data point. So at 2.7 months of inventory, this is still, again, a seller's market, okay? Now, in terms of average sale price on condominiums, again, we're looking at weekly adjustments. So when you look at the number of deals, it's 102 listings and 63 sales. So don't let this fool you. This is probably not a trend. You look at the last couple of weeks, it's been up and down. So right now, as of the last week, we're at $640,000 on average, but this is probably not a trend. It's probably not material from that perspective. And it is still what looks like a seller's market. Now, looking at the supply and demand, again, same story here. Supply and demand have kind of converged on one another. Trend-wise, they've been up and down together. If they start going in different directions, we'll start seeing price adjustments. But based on all of the economic numbers we're reading, all of the tabloids that we're reading in terms of what predictions are looking at from the major banks and financial institutions, this year is supposed to round up to be a very good one. And anybody that has a client sitting on the fence right now, the dialogue for the most part should be that even though the interest rates are higher now, you may get a pretty reasonable deal this quarter. The next couple of weeks, next couple of months, you'll get a good deal. You'll actually do very well in this market. When the interest rates start coming down, a lot of you have experienced what happens when money becomes cheaper, more buyers rush to the market. When more buyers rush to the market, well, it's all multiple offers, no conditions, way over asking. So before we end up in that market, anybody that you're coaching right now that's sitting on the fence saying, I'm going to wait till, February or March, the advice might be, hey, if you buy now, you might be buying at a higher interest rate. That's understood, but you can always refinance the rate. Once the prices start going up, it's not going anywhere. And we know, I actually published in the closed Facebook group an interesting metric that I came across. Let me share it with you here in case you haven't seen it. So we know that the province is trying to push out 1.5 million homes by 2031. We also know that our output capacity is between 30 and 40,000 units a year. We don't have the plumbers, the electricians, the drywallers, the tapers to come in and even build the type of properties we need. And if you compare nation to the G7, for us to be considered the average of the G7, we would have to build 1.8 million homes today. So anybody that thinks it's going to improve, it's not going to improve. When we talk about a housing crisis, we're talking about a housing shortage. The reason prices keep escalating is because there's not enough inventory, and every day the number of people entering this country is continuing to increase. And we need to continue to increase the number of people that are coming into the country because people like my dad, the baby boomers, are getting older. We have a very top-heavy population pyramid, and we need the tax funding and the resources. We need the professionals we're bringing in from the rest of the world to come in and support that enormous elephant that's about to come through. So all the metrics are in favor of housing. It doesn't look like things are going anywhere. Anybody that's having conversations with clients right now, you guys need to have meaningful conversations and give them the insights and the data, because all of those things are indicating that things are probably going to get really crazy really soon. Anybody have any feedback or questions?
Ricky, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So one is with respect to just the visual that you just shared. So I looked at it before, but first two make sense. The third doesn't make sense to me. How is it more choice? And because based on the first two, we're nowhere close to fulfilling the need. So
Yeah,
how
for
does
sure.
the impact translate into more choice? Well, more houses built, okay, fine, more choice, but balanced market, how? That's one.
So I think the idea is that if we're able to build 1.5 million homes, if we're able to surge an influx of inventory into our market, then that's going to ease the pressures a little bit, right? So the months of inventory will start increasing if we're able to build the 65 or 70,000 homes a year. I personally don't think we have the capacity. I was at a Rotman School of Business real estate roundtable session 6 months ago, and I can't remember who the builder was, but they were saying our output capacity is 40,000 units a year. And so you can free up all the land. You can make taxes super low. We just don't have the trades and the skilled people required to be able to put this together.
Yeah. And the second one, because every time that we do this market minute, you kind of forecast or predict something, what would be the focus when the interest rate is announced. So what is your forecast for this time's announcement?
Yeah.
Apart from that, it's not going to change. What else do you think they're going to focus on?
I don't think it's going to change. I think everything is getting a little bit better, right? I think consumer confidence is bolstered as well. If you look at what's happening in terms of media right now and what's reporting, like with the country taking a stance that by 2035, they want every vehicle to be an e-vehicle, we're going to see some shifts, right? Like even the consumers that I talk to that dabble in gas stations and these type of asset class bases, mindsets are starting to shift a little bit now because those key points, those key stations off of the 401 and here and there, this is going to impact, these policies are going to impact a lot of businesses at a wide level. And I mean, producing, if you think about it, I don't know if this is still true. I think it is. People that are driving gas-powered vehicles are paying for the roads right now. If you drive an e-vehicle, you're not paying a lot of money compared to someone like me that still is using a gas vehicle. So there's going to be some interesting dynamics at play here because if everybody transitions to an e-vehicle, we're going to need to tax those vehicles appropriately so that we can maintain this infrastructure. I mean, you drive down some of the highways and roads now, it's kind of interesting to see the condition that we're in.
Yeah, Alberta has also started charging tax on the fuel, which they weren't charging before that greenhouse tax.
It's gonna. I mean, if the goal is carbon neutral and e-vehicles and less natural gas consumption, and everybody's starting to deviate in the other direction, it's going to be a problem for places like Alberta. But it'll be interesting to see where it happens, because right now you go and do a deal in other parts of the country. Well, there's no land transfer tax, right? They don't have development charges and levies. They're trying to encourage people to move into these hotspots. But as things kind of shift, as I think priorities start shifting, things will get interesting. And remember, next year is an election year. So with an election year and everybody talking about housing, it's been a hot topic for every platform, every media outlet. This is not going to be great. And so every platform, every government organization is going to be all about housing. And a lot of the things, like this article came from the Toronto Star, and this article was focusing on this because, again, that's the provincial government's mandate. The Conservatives right now want people to understand that they're trying to do something about this crisis.
Yeah. And I mean, something relevant that I've noticed is that, on the pre-construction side, we see a lot of the builders right now offering EV charging at a separate cost. But as these things become sort of more normalized, I wonder if they're going to be, charging it similar to what they're charging regular parking, right?
Yeah. And I think that's inevitable, right? Especially in a competitive pre-construction and building environment. Most of the savvier builders that are in tune with consumer wants and needs are going to recognize the need for retrofitting and having the e-vehicle, charging station. Like we're in the condo I live now. I don't even want to think about an e-vehicle because I'd have to literally spend $10,000 or $15,000 retrofitting my space, right?
Yeah.
So I think that because the builders are very much connected and in tune with what's happening at the government level. If the government priorities are changing, then these people are well aware because they're stakeholders as well to some extent in terms of what's happening. So we should see development shift in that situation as well.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else have anything to add? Okay, fantastic, guys. So keep in mind that we have a training session this Thursday. It's a hybrid session. I'd love to see you in person if you're able to make it. We're going to continue on the conversation with Tressa. There's some new technology that's been released by, I think it's PropTech through Toronto Real Estate Board, where the open offer process, they've given us an actual platform to use. So I'm going to be hopefully doing a demo with that. I don't know how intricate I'll be able to do it, but I'll be able to at least showcase that new technology and what that means. It's a potential game changer for our industry. So we'll see everybody soon. Take care, guys.